Hello everyone, this is Oliver Lazar speaking from Essen in Germany. Apologies that I can't be with you with the annual gathering 2024, but I hope you have had a lovely event, a lovely day so far. And yeah, a few weeks ago, David Lorimer sent an email to me and he wrote, Oliver, congratulations, you are one of the winners of the Book Prize 2023 of the Science and Medical Network, and I really was over the moon, so it really means a lot to me. And I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you about my book, about my own spiritual experience, and I think a good starting point would be to show you my book. So here it is, it's called Beyond Matter. And I would like to read the blurb so that you get a first impression of my book. And then I thought I would like to talk about my own spiritual awakening experience, because this is the starting point of the whole story. And now I'd like to read the blurb. A scientist's groundbreaking findings that revolutionize afterlife research. Oliver Lazar is a medical doctor and a professor of computer science. In this moving book, he describes how the spiritual world revealed itself to him after the tragic accidental death of a girl who seemed to be a stranger to him. And he presents a picture of the profound psychic experiences that followed this revelation. He examines current research into the subject of our origins and existence from a scientific, philosophical, and spiritual perspective, and reports on an emerging paradigm shift in our society. With the world's largest empirical study on mediumistic afterlife contacts, with 500 participants, but also with his criticism of current doctrines on the origin of life and the theory of evolution, he shakes the materialist worldview. And David Lorimer was so kind to write a wonderful foreword. So thank you very, very much, David. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate what Professor Lance Butler did for me. He helped me with the translation of this book, and he wrote a wonderful text on the blurb, and I'd like to read it. Professor Lance Butler, chairman of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre, Edinburgh. Oliver Lazar's work is exactly what we need. With him, we finally have someone who knows the biology, the physics, the medicine, and the computing science that normally accompany materialism. But it was these very disciplines, along with a stunning spiritual experience, that thrust him into taking the existence of a higher dimension equally seriously. He has brought real sense and scientific rigor to the subject of the afterlife. So thank you very much, Professor Lance Butler. Before we take a look into my book, I think it is important to give you an impression of what happened to me. So I wasn't really interested in spirituality all my life. There was this one specific experience which really turned my life upside down, and it has some kind of a tragic background, because I would say that 43 years of my life I really lived in a materialistic worldview. But I have witnessed the accidental death of one of my daughter's classmates, and her name was Joma. She was riding on her bicycle to school, and there was this huge concrete mixer truck turning right, and due to the blind spot, the driver didn't see that girl riding on her bike, and the truck ran over her. So Joma died in the afternoon. The moment I found out that Joma really died, something happened to me. It has torn my heart apart. It really pulled the ground from under my feet, and I fell into such a deep grief that I have never felt before in my life. And of course, you might say, Oliver, this is just usual empathy. And to a certain point, I really would agree. But what I felt went far, far, far beyond that. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks after the accident that I sat here in my office and I was thinking about the whole accident. I was thinking about Joma's parents. And I think it is important to mention that I didn't know Joma at all. I almost spoke to any other child of my daughter's class, but I never spoke to Joma. But somehow I felt a very deep connection to that girl and to that family. And I was sitting here in my office, I closed my eyes and I was thinking of Joma. And I was so sad. And what I have experienced then, this is what I would like to call my spiritual awakening experience. Because suddenly I knew I wasn't alone anymore. So there was some kind of a consciousness approaching me from the outside, and I felt an inner vibration. And suddenly there were goosebumps running up and down in waves only on the left side of my body. And this came to me in such a pithiness. It was so clear. I didn't have to question it because it was just as real as if I would go to you and grab your arm. So you really know this is real. And so real was this experience. And suddenly I was flooded with an infinite love. I think David Lorimer always calls it cosmic love. It was cosmic love that I felt. And I always compare it to the love that I can feel for my own children, because this is the highest level of love you could experience here on earth. That's what I would say. But the intensity of the love that I have felt at that moment went far, far beyond that. It was, I don't know, I can't really find words to describe the intensity of this love. So I like to say it is divine love, or maybe cosmic love. And there were tears of joy running down my cheeks, and I couldn't understand what was happening there. And I felt someone touching me, touching my hair, touching my cheeks. And it was so real. I exactly knew in that moment that my life would change. This was a life-changing experience. I knew that there will be a new way. I always talk about an update because I'm a computer scientist, and I like to call it, this was the update on version 2.0. But there were, of course, a lot of question marks in my head, because what exactly was it? By now I know that it was a soul contact to Joma. But at that moment I didn't know what it was. So I was reading books and I was watching videos, and I found my first answers where people were talking about their near-death experiences. They also spoke about these light experiences. I also had these light experiences there. They were talking about this divine love and things like that. And so I decided to book an appointment with a medium. The idea was to get in contact with a medium, just to exchange some ideas, just to get an idea of what has happened to me. So I didn't book an afterlife contact because Joma was a stranger to me. And I considered, or I thought that I was not entitled to have an afterlife contact with her. So I booked just an appointment for an aura reading. But the idea was just to exchange some experiences. And when I sat in the office of that medium, she tried to give me an aura reading. But after a few minutes, she stopped it. And she said, "Oliver, I'm sorry. There's nothing more that I can tell you. But I can open up for the spiritual world." And she had some kind of an on-off switch, and she switched on. And then she said, "Oliver, here is a girl in the spiritual world with long blonde hair, and she's showing me a bicycle, and she says that she had died in a bicycle accident. Do you understand it?" And I said, "Yes, I understand it." And I really was overwhelmed. I was so happy about this contact. And the medium was talking about her outward appearance, and everything was accurate. And then she said, "Oliver, the girl is showing herself riding on a horse." And this is something that I could confirm. I didn't know much about Joma, but I knew she was a passionate horse rider. So this was a wonderful proof. And then the medium said, now she's showing me two single number ones. A number one on the left and another number one on the right side. She's drawing it here in front of my eyes. That's what she said. It's not an 11. She emphasized it. It's not an 11, two single number ones. Do you understand this? And I checked the phone number, the date of birth and things like that. Nothing matched. And then I said, I'm sorry, I do not understand the two number ones. And she said, I don't know it either. But this happens quite often, she said. And this will clarify afterwards. And she was right, because a few weeks after this appointment, I went to Joma's mother and I asked her about the two number ones. And she said, yes, I understand it. Because you have to see it in the context of Joma riding on her horse. Joma's mother said shortly before her accident, she won first place twice in an equestrian tournament. And this was a very special moment for me, but also for Joma's mother. Because what was the origin, what was the source of this highly specific piece of information? And I think it is obvious that it has to be Joma, because neither the medium nor I did know this information. But in the end, it was a highly specific piece of information which was true. So it some kind was not a message for me, it was a message for her mother. She knew that I would go to her mother and ask her about it. And I think it is obvious that it was Joma, because she's the only person who knew it, and she's the one person who is highly motivated to bring on this information. The medium continued. She said that in a previous life I once have been Joma's father, and that I also had to experience her early death in that previous life. And you know, during that sitting, let's call it sitting, I didn't have a single doubt. I was absolutely sure this is all true, because it felt so real and it felt right. And suddenly I understood my emotions. As I went home, I was driving in my car and the critical scientist came back again. So was I convinced 100%? Not really, so I needed more evidence. I booked a seminar about reincarnation, and this seminar took place about 2 or 3 weeks after this first appointment with the first medium. And as I was sitting in this seminar room, there was this introduction round, and I was sitting right beside Bettina Suvirode, who was the medium. And I just said, hi, my name is Oliver, and I have experienced the accidental death of one of my daughter's classmates. She already interrupted me, and she said, yes, Oliver, I know. And the girl is standing right behind you, and she has long blonde hair. It's a very tiny person, and she described the girl very accurately. And then she said, and in a previous life, you have been her father, and you have also had to experience her early death. But you shouldn't experience it again in this life. And then she described the whole accident. She could say what exactly has happened. She could describe the truck, the color of the truck, where the girl died. She didn't die at that place. She died in the afternoon in the hospital, and many other details that I have that I haven't known. So I had to go to Joma's parents and to ask them. And I would say that about 80 to 90% of the information given by the medium were accurate. And this was the point where I said to myself, Oliver, now you can't lie any longer to yourself. So this is true. This is absolutely true. Especially in these seminars, I have met a lot of mourning people, especially orphaned parents. And when you see that these inconsolably suffering people suddenly can smile again, You know how comforting it is to receive messages directly from the beyond. So when the medium is able to give you highly specific pieces of information, things like family secrets or things like that, then you know, then you trust, then you know that the consciousness of the deceased one hasn't disappeared. You know that the soul still is there. And I thought it might be a good idea to take a look at it in a scientific way. So this was the starting point of the Irium study that I will talk about later on, but I think now we will have a closer look at the contents of my book. So let's have a look at the contents. Of course, here this is the wonderful foreword by David Latimer. And in chapter 1, I am talking about my own spiritual awakening experience. So this is what I have been talking about in the first part of this video, but here you can find the long version of it. And in chapter 7, let's go to chapter 7. Here you can find the Irium study. So here I'm talking about all the details, what exactly was the study design, what were the results, and so on. And I would like to give you an impression of the results at the end of this video. But first of all, I'd like to answer the question, why are there so many chapters in between? Why is there a chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? The main purpose for me to write this book was to give consolation, to help people who are in a mourning process, who are in a deep grief. And most persons, especially here in the Western civilization, grew up in a materialistic worldview. So they are some kind of stuck in a materialistic worldview. They can't find consolation. And I thought that it might not be enough to show only my Irium study. So if I would show them here is evidence for the survival of our soul after physical death, that this would not have been enough. I think it is important to show that the materialistic worldview stands on very shaky ground. And I thought when you see that everything that you have learned all your life long, at school, at university, and that you see in the public media, that everything that you have learned has to be questioned, and that it all stands on very shaky ground, only then you might be open for new ideas, for a new reality. And this is the reason why I have written so much about what is matter, how did life came into existence, what about evolution, what about brain and consciousness, what exactly is love, and what has quantum mechanics to do with it. And now let's have a look at the chapters. So in chapter 2, Science and Spirituality, the main focus is on the scientists who really have great courage to go into public with their ideas, because it is really very dangerous. It is dangerous as materialist scientists who go into public and talk about life after death. And this is what I'm talking about in chapter 2. Chapter 3 is about matter. Where does matter come from? It's about the Big Bang, stars and nuclear fusion. And it is about that matter is not material. Because when you take a look at the atoms, at the molecules, and you go into the nucleus of an atom, you find the up and the down quarks and the gluons. And in the end, you find out all these particles are massless. And the only thing that we have is some kind of an oscillation. We only have energy. So when we take a look at our body, in the smallest, we can see that there is no matter, so we are all some kind of an oscillation. In chapter 4, which is, I think, the biggest part of the book, I'm talking about origin of life and evolution of life. So we have different theories here. Of course, Darwin's theory of evolution. We have intelligent design. We have involution and Vedic mystery knowledge. And yeah, this is what I'm discussing in chapter 4. Chapter 5 is about consciousness. Does consciousness arise in the brain? What about current research, brain research? And where does love come from? And in chapter 6, I'm talking about quantum mechanics. And what has quantum mechanics to do with spirituality? And in the end, I come to the conclusion that quantum mechanics helps us understand that there are realities, that there are dimensions without time and without space. And chapter 7, I think it is the climax. It is about the Irium study. And slowly I come to the end of this video, and I'd like to show you some slides of my Irium's presentation with the results of our study. Let's start with some demographic data. We have had 500 participants from all over the world, especially from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But we also had participants from the United States of America, Denmark, Spain, Luxembourg, France, and India. We had 87.8% female participants and 12.2% male participants. The average age was 49.4 years, the youngest participant was 17 years old, and the oldest was 86 years old. The study took place from March 2019 until September 2022, and we had 302 sittings in person, so the medium and the bereaved person, they met each other, and 198 sittings were online via Zoom. One of the main questions in this study was there a highly specific piece of information that the medium could not possibly have known? And here you can see that 431 participants said definitely yes, 86.2%. And a further 10.4% said rather yes. And when we break it down to the 4 groups, we can see here on this slide that there was no difference between the group who said I was convinced beforehand and the group who said I am very skeptical. As you can see here on the left side, on the red group has 92.9%. So the red group are the persons with no belief, and they answered with 92.9% that they have received a highly specific piece of information, some kind like a family secret or something like that. The second main research question in our study was, to what extent was the afterlife contact by mediumship comforting for you? And here we can see that 80.6% of the participants said it was very comforting, and a further 15.6% said that it was partly comforting. So when you sum it up, you have about 97% of the participants who say that a mediumistic afterlife contact is comforting. And I think this shows how powerful an authentic mediumistic afterlife contact is. This is, of course, just a small glimpse of what we really did. And if you'd like to know more about it, I guess you have to read my book. Thank you very much for your attention. And I wish you a lovely day at the annual gathering. And bye-bye from Germany.